History is usually sold as kings, battles, and fancy statues with missing noses. But every so often, nature walked in, flipped the table, and erased entire cities like a bored god with terrible anger issues. Today, 33 ancient disasters so bizarre, brutal, and world-changing that they make modern bad news look almost politely organized. 1. In the year 3165 of the Common Era, Alexandria got a warning so obvious it practically came with a giant flashing sign. The sea suddenly pulled back, exposing the harbor floor, stranded ships, and fish flopping around like free groceries. And because humans have always been humans, people ran out to collect them. Not exactly a survival masterclass. Then the Mediterranean came back as a wall of water. The tsunami smashed into the city, hurled ships inland, crushed buildings, and turned curiosity into catastrophe. Roman writer Ammianus Marcellinus described the sea retreating, people wandering onto the exposed seabed, and then the wave returning with terrifying force. Ancient Alexandria was one of the smartest cities on Earth, but on that day, the ocean gave everyone a very brutal lesson in not trusting suspiciously free fish. 2. The year 536 was history's version of someone turning the sun's brightness down to 10% and then forgetting to fix it. Across parts of Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, people reported a weird, dry fog that dimmed the sky for months. The sun shone without brightness, like a sad lamp in a basement. Summer temperatures crashed, crops failed, and in China, sources even describe snow falling during what should have been warm months. Modern scientists connect this disaster to massive volcanic eruptions that blasted particles into the atmosphere and blocked sunlight. And because one apocalypse apparently looked lonely, more eruptions and the Justinian plague followed. Imagine living through cold, famine, darkness, and disease, all before anyone could even dramatically post "worst year ever." This one actually earned the title. 3. The Great Flood of Gunyu is one of China's most legendary disaster stories, and honestly, it has the energy of a cosmic engineering exam with no lunch break. According to tradition, China suffered years of devastating floods so large they swallowed fields, villages, roads, and any hope of normal government paperwork. Gun tried to stop the water with dikes, basically telling nature, "Please stay behind this wall," which nature famously does not respect. His son Yu took over with a smarter plan. Instead of blocking the floods, he carved channels, dredged rivers, and guided the water toward the sea. The wildest part of the legend says Yu worked for 13 years and passed his own home 3 times without entering. His wife was inside, his child was growing up, and Yu was outside saying, "Sorry, civilization is leaking." 4. In 524 before the Common Era, Persian king Cambyses supposedly sent 50,000 soldiers into the Sahara to punish the Oracle of Siwa. Yes, an entire army was dispatched to teach a desert oracle a lesson, because apparently ancient imperial management had no "maybe don't fight sand" department. According to Herodotus, the troops marched deep into the desert, stopped for a meal, and then a massive sandstorm buried them. No glorious battle. No heroic last stand. Just wind, heat, and 50,000 men disappearing like the Sahara pressed delete. Archaeologists have searched for traces, and dramatic claims pop up from time to time. But the Lost Army remains one of history's great unsolved disaster stories. Whether literal or exaggerated, the message is beautifully simple. When the desert says no, it does not schedule a meeting. 5. Around the end of Ptolemaic Egypt, when Cleopatra's world was collapsing and Rome was moving in with all the subtlety of a tax audit, Egypt also faced brutal environmental stress. Some later traditions and modern retellings describe a terrifying snake plague, where extreme heat and a weak Nile flood supposedly pushed venomous snakes out of the desert and into human homes, searching for shade and moisture. Is every detail perfectly proven? No. Ancient disaster stories often arrive wearing dramatic makeup. But the fear was very real. Egypt depended on the Nile's rhythm, and when that rhythm failed, everything went weird fast. Crops suffered, pests moved, disease spread, and people looked at the natural world like it had joined the enemy. Imagine losing your empire, your food supply, and then finding a cobra in the kitchen. History had no chill. 6. The Antioch earthquake of 526 was not just a disaster. It was disaster with absolutely cursed timing. Antioch was one of the great cities of the Eastern Roman world. Rich, crowded, religiously important, and full of churches, markets, and beautiful buildings that probably felt very permanent 5 seconds before they were not. The quake struck near the Feast of the Ascension, when huge numbers of visitors had arrived for worship and celebration. So the city was packed, because apparently the calendar wanted maximum damage. Buildings collapsed, fires spread through the ruins, and ancient sources give death tolls as high as 250,000. That number may be exaggerated, but the catastrophe was enormous. Antioch survived many disasters in its long history, but this one hit like the earth had personally waited for rush hour. 7. Tall el-Hammam, a Bronze Age city near the Dead Sea, has one of the most dramatic disaster theories ever proposed. A cosmic airburst, something like a giant meteor exploding in the sky, blasting the city with heat and shock. The story sounds like a Hollywood apocalypse with pottery. Some researchers argued that around 1650, before the Common Era, the explosion flattened buildings, melted materials, and helped inspire later memories of fiery destruction, possibly even stories like Sodom and Gomorrah. But here is the important part. This theory is heavily debated, and a major paper supporting it was retracted. So we should not treat it as settled fact. Still, the archaeological destruction layer is real enough to raise eyebrows. Something catastrophic happened there, and whatever it was, the city did not gently fade away. It got deleted from the neighborhood. 8. In 589, Rome got a disaster combo so disgusting it sounds like medieval horror fan fiction, except people actually believed they were living through it. The Tiber River flooded, swamping the city and reportedly carrying dead animals, debris, and snakes through the streets. Ancient writers loved a dramatic omen, and honestly, a river full of dead serpents is not exactly giving everything is fine. Then, disease followed. The plague struck Rome, killing many residents, including Pope Pelagius II. The city, once the center of an empire, was now dealing with floods, rot, panic, and a religious crisis all at once. Gregory the Great became pope after this nightmare and organized processions of prayer through the city. Rome had survived barbarians, emperors, and political chaos. But this was nature kicking open the door and saying, "I also have notes." 9. The Nazca people of Peru are famous for those enormous desert lines, the ones that look like someone tried to impress aliens with a really committed art project. But their civilization may have helped engineer its own environmental collapse. The region depended on huarango trees, tough desert survivors with deep roots that stabilized soil, held moisture, and made the landscape livable. Then people cut many of them down for farming, fuel, and building. At first, that probably looked like progress. More land, more resources, great plan. Then El Niño floods arrived, and without the tree roots holding the ground together, water ripped through the valley. Fields were damaged, soils eroded, and the environment became harsher. The Nazca did not vanish because they forgot how to draw giant monkeys. They weakened their own safety net, and nature found the loose thread. 10. Around the year 232, the Taupo volcano in New Zealand erupted with such insane violence that calling it local feels rude to physics. This was one of the most powerful eruptions of the last several thousand years, blasting ash, gas, and superheated flows across the landscape. The pyroclastic currents moved at terrifying speeds, the kind of heat cloud that does not chase you so much as instantly win the argument. Some researchers and popular accounts connect this eruption to strange sky reports from places as far away as Rome and China, where people described unusual red or darkened skies. That link is debated, but the scale of the eruption was absolutely real. For people near Taupo, the world did not just end metaphorically. The sky exploded, the land burned, and the map got rewritten without asking permission. 11. Helike was a Greek city on the Gulf of Corinth, and in 373 before the Common Era, it performed the most horrifying magic trick in urban history. Now you see it. Now the sea owns it. Ancient accounts say animals fled before the disaster, which is always the moment humans should stop feeling clever and follow the goats. Then an earthquake struck, the ground sank, and a tsunami swept over the city. By morning, Helike was gone, submerged beneath water and mud. Later writers compared it to a real-life warning from Poseidon, because if your city disappears into the sea, the god of earthquakes and oceans becomes an obvious suspect. The story may have helped shape later fantasies about drowned civilizations, including Atlantis-like legends. Helike was not mythology, though. It was a city, and then it was a memory. 12. The Antonine plague began around 165, when Roman soldiers returned from campaigns in the east carrying something far worse than trophies. Ancient sources describe a devastating disease that many historians suspect may have been smallpox, though the exact diagnosis is still debated. Either way, it tore through the Roman Empire like an invisible invading army with better logistics than Rome itself. Cities emptied, farms lost workers, soldiers died, and trade routes became disease highways. The empire that had spent centuries mastering roads, ports, and military movement suddenly discovered the dark side of being extremely connected. Even emperors were not safe. Marcus Aurelius ruled through the crisis, and his co-emperor Lucius Verus may have died from the plague. Rome brought back a souvenir from war, and the receipt was paid in bodies, taxes, and imperial stability. 13. Doggerland was the prehistoric land bridge between Britain and continental Europe, a world of rivers, wetlands, forests, and hunters who had no idea they were living on future seabed. As sea levels rose after the Ice Age, Doggerland slowly shrank. Then came the Storegga tsunami, triggered by a gigantic underwater landslide off Norway around 6200 before the Common Era. A huge wave raced across the North Sea and slammed into low-lying coasts. Older versions of the story made it sound like the tsunami single-handedly cut Britain away from Europe. But modern research is more careful. Rising seas were already doing the long, slow drowning, and the tsunami was a brutal accelerator in some areas. Still, imagine watching the horizon stand up and run toward you. Doggerland did not vanish politely. It was erased by patience, then punched by a wave. 14. The Yellow River is called China's Sorrow, which is a very poetic way of saying, this river has killed a terrifying number of people. The river carries enormous amounts of yellow loess sediment, so much that it can raise its own bed above the surrounding land. That is already a terrible design choice, like building a bathtub over your living room. Add deforestation, farming pressure, weak levees, and political chaos, and the result was repeated mega-flooding across Chinese history. When the river broke through, it could change course, drown fields, destroy cities, and leave millions homeless. Some floods killed on a scale almost impossible to process. The tragedy was not just water. It was environment, engineering, population pressure, and government failure forming the worst group project imaginable. The Yellow River fed China, but it also kept the bill. 15. Bura was Helike's unlucky neighbor, and ancient writers often pair the two disasters like a nightmare double feature. In 373 before the Common Era, the earthquake that destroyed Helike also devastated Bura, but the reported fate of Bura sounds even more brutally direct. While Helike sank and was swallowed by the sea, Bura was said to have been wrecked inland, with the ground cracking open and the city collapsing into destruction. Later accounts describe survivors struggling to explain how two nearby communities could be ruined in one night by the same violent movement of the earth. Whether every dramatic detail is literal or polished by ancient storytelling, the disaster shows how terrifying Greek seismic zones could be. People built temples, walls, and civic pride. The earth answered with one shrug, and two cities became a warning label. 16. The 10 plagues of Egypt are usually told as divine punishment, and on the story level, they absolutely work like the most terrifying escalation sequence ever written. But some researchers have also explored whether parts of the sequence could resemble an ecological chain reaction. Imagine the Nile turning toxic from algae or pollution, fish dying, frogs fleeing the poisoned water, insects multiplying without normal predators, livestock disease spreading, and humans watching the entire environment fail in chapters. To ancient Egyptians whose religion, farming, and political order depended on the Nile behaving properly, this would not look like an unusual ecological event. It would look like the universe filing a complaint against Pharaoh. Whether read as scripture, memory, or environmental interpretation, the power of the story comes from one terrifying idea. When nature's systems collapse together, civilization suddenly feels very small. 17. Skara Brae, the Neolithic village in Orkney, looks like someone paused a Stone Age neighborhood and buried it for 5,000 years. Stone beds, hearths, storage spaces, narrow passages, all preserved with eerie neatness. A popular dramatic theory says a huge storm or sand invasion may have forced the inhabitants to leave quickly, turning the village into a prehistoric time capsule. Archaeologists are more cautious. The abandonment may have been gradual, linked to climate becoming colder and wetter, coastal change, and shifting ways of life. But the storm theme is not random. In 1850, a severe storm ripped away the grass and sand covering the site and revealed the houses again. So whether Skara Brae was abandoned in panic or slow retreat, the image is unforgettable. A village swallowed by sand, then returned by weather like history had been hiding under a blanket. 18. The Justinian plague arrived in 541, and it had the worst possible travel agent, the grain supply. Constantinople depended on ships bringing grain from Egypt and North Africa, and those ships also carried rats, fleas, and the bacterium behind bubonic plague. Congratulations, your bread delivery comes with empire destabilization. The disease spread through the Byzantine world, killing on a massive scale and hammering Emperor Justinian's dream of restoring Roman power. Ancient accounts describe bodies piling up so fast that normal burial systems collapsed. In Constantinople, corpses were reportedly packed into towers and pits because the city simply ran out of decent options. The plague did not single-handedly end the empire, but it weakened armies, economies, and morale at exactly the wrong time. Justinian wanted Rome reborn. The rats brought a cancellation notice. 19. The Crete earthquake of 365 was so powerful that parts of western Crete were lifted up by several meters in seconds. Think about that. Not a slow geological adjustment over cozy millions of years. Seconds. The seabed moved, the coast rose, and the Mediterranean responded by building a tsunami that tore across the region. Alexandria was hit especially hard. Ancient accounts describe ships thrown far inland, buildings smashed, and people caught by the sea's horrifying retreat and return. Modern geology backs up the scale. Raised shorelines on Crete still show where the land jumped upward. This was not just an earthquake. It was the Mediterranean rearranging furniture with everyone still inside the room. Empires like to believe maps are stable. Then the planet stretches and suddenly harbors, streets, and coastlines become temporary suggestions. 20. Baiae was ancient Rome's luxury playground, basically a volcanic Las Vegas with senators, emperors, hot springs, villas, parties, scandals, and probably at least one rich man saying, "This is tasteful," while building a marble bath bigger than a normal family home. It sat near the Cambyses volcanic zone, which sounds romantic until you remember that volcanic zone means the ground has opinions. Over centuries, magma movement caused bradysism, the slow rising and sinking of land. Baiae did not explode in one dramatic evening like Pompeii. It sank with cruel patience. Streets, mosaics, statues, and bath complexes slipped beneath the sea, turning elite real estate into an underwater archaeological park. The Roman rich built paradise on restless ground, and the earth eventually repossessed the property. Honestly, the deposit was probably enormous. 21. The Toba supervolcano erupted around 74,000 years ago, and one theory says it nearly pushed humanity to the edge of extinction. The eruption blasted enormous amounts of ash and sulfur into the atmosphere, potentially blocking sunlight, cooling the planet, and damaging ecosystems. Older versions of the theory argue that human populations may have crashed to only a few thousand survivors. That dramatic bottleneck idea is debated, and not all evidence supports such an extreme global collapse. But even the less apocalyptic version is still terrifying. Early humans were small, scattered groups with stone tools, fire, and no emergency agriculture app. If the sky dimmed, plants failed, animals moved, and temperatures dropped, survival became a daily negotiation with hunger. We are here because some humans endured that darkness. Every family tree may include someone who beat a supervolcano with stubbornness. 22. The Cimbrian flood appears in Greek and Roman accounts as a great sea incursion around the Jutland region, the homeland associated with the Cimbri. Ancient writers linked environmental disaster to migration, suggesting that storms, flooding, or the sea eating into the land pushed people south. Modern historians debate the details because ancient authors loved clean explanations and dramatic barbarians at the border. But the idea is powerful. Climate stress may have helped turn northern communities into migrants, and those migrants eventually collided with Rome. The Cimbri and Teutones moved across Europe, terrifying the Roman Republic before being defeated by Marius. If the flood tradition preserves even a distorted memory of coastal crisis, it is one of history's earliest climate refugee stories. The sea rises, farms fail, people move, and suddenly Rome has a problem with swords. 23. The plague of Cyprian hit the Roman Empire in the 3rd century, and the symptoms described by Bishop Cyprian are pure nightmare fuel. Victims suffered fever, vomiting, diarrhea, weakness, eye problems, and in some accounts, limbs decaying or failing in ways that made people think the body was being punished from inside. Ancient observers described the disease as if fire were burning through the organs. We do not know exactly what pathogen caused it. Guesses range from viral hemorrhagic fever to smallpox-like disease, but certainty is not available. What is certain is the damage. The plague struck during the crisis of the 3rd century when Rome was already juggling invasions, civil wars, inflation, and emperors with expiration dates shorter than milk. Then disease arrived and made the empire feel cosmically doomed. Romans were not being dramatic. Their world was cracking. 24. The Marib Dam in Yemen was one of the great engineering achievements of ancient South Arabia. It turned desert-edge land into a fertile oasis, supporting the kingdom of Saba and a rich agricultural society. This was not a cute little village pond. It was infrastructure that made civilization possible. Then, after centuries of repairs, stress, and political change, the dam finally failed around the 6th century. The irrigation system collapsed, fields dried out, and the oasis economy that depended on controlled water began to unravel. Later traditions connect the disaster to major migrations of Arab tribes across the peninsula. Whether every migration story is exact or not, the symbolism is perfect. One broken dam, and an entire social world starts packing. Ancient people knew what modern people keep relearning. When your water system dies, your civilization does not need an enemy army. 25. In 563, Lake Geneva produced a tsunami, because apparently even a beautiful alpine lake can wake up and choose violence. The disaster is known as the Torridunum event. A massive landslide crashed near the eastern end of the lake, likely disturbing underwater sediments and creating a wave that raced across the water. Contemporary chroniclers described villages being destroyed along the shore, and Geneva itself being struck with terrifying force. Modern studies suggest waves may have reached several meters high by the time they hit Geneva, with even larger heights closer to the source. This was not the ocean. This was inland Europe, where people probably assumed their lake was decorative, not homicidal. The wave crossed the lake in about an hour, which is just enough time for nature to be both terrifying and punctual. 26. The Late Bronze Age collapse was not one disaster. It was civilization getting hit by a combo attack and dropping the controller. Around the 12th century before the Common Era, great palace societies across the eastern Mediterranean began failing. Mycenaean Greece, the Hittite Empire, cities in Syria and Canaan, trade networks, writing systems, royal bureaucracies, the whole shiny Bronze Age machine. The causes are still debated, but the suspects include drought, famine, earthquakes, internal rebellions, broken trade, and the mysterious sea peoples, who appear in Egyptian records like the ancient world's most stressful surprise guests. The real horror is that everything was connected. Bronze required long-distance trade. Palaces required farmers. Armies required food. One system broke another, then another, then another. It was not the end of the world, but for palace elites, it was definitely the end of their very expensive world. 27. Petra was not just a city carved into rose-red cliffs. It was an engineering flex in the desert. The Nabateans built channels, cisterns, dams, and pipes that captured scarce rainwater and turned a harsh landscape into a wealthy trading hub. Then, in 363, a major earthquake struck the region. Buildings were damaged, but the real disaster was deeper. Petra's brilliant water system was badly disrupted. And in a desert city, water infrastructure is not a convenience. It is the difference between luxury caravan metropolis and beautiful place to dehydrate. Trade routes were already changing. Roman control had shifted the economy, and the earthquake made recovery harder. Petra did not vanish instantly, but the disaster helped push it downhill. The city famous for mastering stone and water discovered that one violent shake could break the hidden plumbing of civilization. 28. Mount Pektu, on the border of China and Korea, produced the Millennium Eruption in 946, one of the largest volcanic eruptions of the last 5,000 years. It blasted ash high into the sky, formed the caldera now holding Heaven Lake, and spread volcanic material across huge areas, including parts of Japan. Historical records from East Asia mention strange weather in the years around the eruption, though scientists still debate how global the climate effects were. Locally and regionally, the impact was enormous. Ashfall can ruin fields, poison water, collapse roofs, kill animals, and make daily life feel like someone replaced the air with a fireplace. Whole communities may have been forced to move or reorganize. Pektu was not just a mountain exploding. It was a reminder that borders are human inventions, and ash does not care about passports. 29. The flood traditions around the Cimbri and Jutland also point to a slower disaster. Coastal life in northern Europe could be wrecked not only by one wave, but by repeated storm tides, land loss, saltwater intrusion, and economic stress. For communities tied to cattle, farming, fishing, amber routes, and coastal exchange, the sea did not need to erase everything overnight. It could ruin fields, contaminate grazing land, damage settlements, and make staying home look increasingly foolish. Ancient writers later framed the Cimbri as people pushed from their lands by flooding before their long migration toward the Roman world. The exact history is debated, but the pattern is painfully believable. First, the sea takes the edge of your world. Then, it takes your food. Then your neighbors say, maybe Italy has better weather, and Rome gets an armed migration crisis. 30. Around 39,000 years ago, the Campanian ignimbrite eruption exploded from the volcanic region near modern Naples, and it was one of the largest eruptions Europe has seen in the age of humans and Neanderthals. Ash spread across wide areas, ecosystems were stressed, and temperatures may have dropped. Some researchers once suggested this eruption helped deliver a final blow to Neanderthals, who were already struggling as modern humans expanded into Europe. But the theory is debated. Later studies argue many Neanderthal populations were already in serious decline before the eruption, so it probably was not a single volcanic murder weapon. Still, imagine being a small Ice Age group and watching the sky darken with ash from an Italian super-eruption. Even if it was not the final cause, it was one more awful day in a very unfair century. 31. The Akkadian Empire was the world's first known empire, and it did not collapse because one heroic enemy dramatically kicked down the gates in slow motion. It seems to have been weakened by climate disaster. Around 2200 before the Common Era, a severe drought hit parts of the Near East, connected to the wider 4.2 kiloyear event. Rainfall dropped, agriculture suffered, cities in northern Mesopotamia were abandoned, and desperate populations moved toward regions that still had water and grain. The Akkadians had armies, rulers, scribes, taxes, and imperial pride, but none of that makes wheat grow in dust. Later texts remembered famine and chaos. Archaeology shows settlement disruption and environmental stress. The empire that conquered people across Mesopotamia could not conquer a centuries-long dry spell. Very embarrassing for imperial propaganda, but extremely educational for everyone else. 32. Pavlopetri, off the coast of southern Greece, is one of the oldest known submerged towns in the world, with streets, buildings, courtyards, and tombs still visible underwater. It flourished in the Bronze Age, and unlike cities destroyed in one spectacular catastrophe, Pavlopetri seems to have gone under slowly. The land subsided, sea levels changed, earthquakes may have played a role, and the water kept creeping in. That kind of disaster is almost creepier than a tsunami. No single dramatic moment. No villain wave. Just the sea taking a little more space, year after year, until your street becomes a shoreline and your shoreline becomes a diving site. People likely adapted, moved, rebuilt, and finally left. Pavlopetri is haunting because it feels so calm. A city did not scream and vanish. It gradually lost an argument with the sea. 33. The Thera eruption around 1600 before the Common Era was the Mediterranean's volcanic mic drop. On the island now known as Santorini, the volcano exploded with massive force, destroying the settlement of Akrotiri and sending ash, earthquakes, and tsunamis across the Aegean world. The eruption did not instantly erase the Minoan civilization by itself, despite the popular dramatic version, but it badly damaged coastal settlements, trade, agriculture, and confidence in the natural order. The Minoans were a wealthy, sophisticated maritime culture, and suddenly the sea itself was carrying destruction back at them. Later, Greek imagination may have folded memories of drowned islands and vanished brilliance into Atlantis-like stories. Thera was not just a volcano, it was a psychological event. One day the Aegean was a trade network. Then the sky turned black, the sea attacked, and history changed direction. So that was 33 times the ancient world learned that civilization is basically a group project built on angry rivers, unstable volcanoes, plague rats, and terrible timing. Now be honest in the comments. Which disaster did we criminally underrate? And which ancient civilization had the dumbest survival strategy? Defend your answer like a Roman senator with something to hide. And if this video taught you one new way the world can ruin everyone's plans, hit like and subscribe.